At my husband's office gala, my place card read, "Pathetic gold digger nobody." His colleagues, especially his smirking female boss, burst into laughter. "Still clinging to him," they sneered. As I walked out, I turned to the CEO and whispered, "I'd check your stock prices if I were you." "And what do you do, Rebecca?" the venture capitalist asked at Ryan's company dinner party. Before I could answer, Ryan jumped in with a laugh. "Oh, Rebecca plays around with some consulting work from home. Nothing too serious, just enough to keep her busy while I handle the real business decisions." The words landed in the middle of our elegant dining room like a grenade. 6 months earlier, my playing around had saved a pension fund $12 million by exposing fraudulent accounting practices at a manufacturing company. The report I'd written was cited in 3 major financial publications. But according to my husband, I was just keeping myself busy. I smiled politely at the table full of investors and tech executives while something fundamental shifted inside me. The woman sitting next to the venture capitalist, a pharmaceutical CEO whose company I'd researched extensively, was nodding sympathetically as if she understood the challenge of managing a wife with hobbies. "How nice that you have time for little projects," she said with the kind of condescending sweetness that made my teeth ache. "Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories that matter. If you believe that women's professional expertise should never be dismissed or undermined, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds." I wanted to tell her that my little projects had exposed more corporate fraud in the past 3 years than her company's entire compliance department. Instead, I reached for my wine glass and wondered when exactly my husband had started seeing me as an amateur. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. 9 years earlier, we'd met in the university library during our final semester. 2 broke students with massive dreams and even bigger student loan payments looming. I was preparing for my corporate finance final when Ryan's constant pen tapping at the next table became impossible to ignore. "You know that rhythm you're tapping matches the opening of that annoying pop song, right?" I whispered during a particularly elaborate percussion solo on his textbook. He looked up with this embarrassed grin that made my heart skip. "Sorry, I think better with background music. Even imaginary background music. I'm Ryan. Rebecca. And I think better with complete silence, so we might have a problem. Or a perfect partnership," he said, sliding his chair closer. "You can handle the quiet concentration, I'll provide the creative energy." That conversation lasted until the library closed. We discovered we both survived entirely on ramen noodles, both dreamed of starting our own companies, and both believed that mediocrity was the only real failure. Ryan wanted to revolutionize how businesses use technology, while I was fascinated by the stories hidden in corporate financial statements. "Let's make a deal," I said as we walked across the empty campus that night. "Whatever happens after graduation, we support each other completely. No competition, no jealousy, just pure partnership. Business partners for life," he agreed, shaking my hand with mock formality. We lived that promise completely during those early years after college. When Ryan landed his first interview at a small tech startup, we celebrated with $3 champagne and spent the entire night rehearsing answers to every possible question. I helped him research the company's technology stack and competitive position until he could discuss their business model better than some of their employees. "You're going to revolutionize their entire approach," I told him as he straightened his tie in our tiny bathroom mirror. "They'd be insane not to hire you. And when you land your first major consulting client, we're upgrading to champagne that doesn't come in plastic bottles," he promised. My consulting business started on our kitchen table because office space was financially impossible. I specialized in equity analysis for smaller investors, helping them identify red flags that larger firms might overlook or deliberately ignore. The work required meticulous attention to detail, countless hours analyzing SEC filings, cross-referencing executive compensation with company performance, and building financial models that could predict trouble before it made headlines. Ryan never complained about our apartment being transformed into a paper-covered research center or the constant humming of my printer during late-night sessions. He'd bring me coffee at midnight and look over my shoulder at spreadsheets filled with numbers that meant nothing to him. "Catch any corporate criminals today?" he'd ask, rubbing my shoulders as I highlighted suspicious transaction patterns. "Actually, I think so," I said one particularly productive evening. This pharmaceutical company has been moving research and development costs between different divisions to make their quarterly earnings look better. Their investors don't realize how much money they're actually losing on failed drug trials. That sounds like fraud. Not technically illegal, but definitely misleading. When the truth comes out, people are going to lose serious money. My report on that pharmaceutical company ended up saving my clients over $4 million when the stock price collapsed 6 months later. Financial journalists quoted my analysis, and suddenly my phone rang constantly with investors wanting to hire the consultant who'd predicted disaster while everyone else recommended buying. Ryan was genuinely excited about my success during those days. At parties, he'd introduce me as the woman who takes down corrupt corporations from our kitchen table, and his pride was completely authentic. We were both building something meaningful, both contributing equally to our shared future. His own career was advancing rapidly through various tech companies. He started as a junior analyst, moved into product management, then secured positions with increasing responsibility and impressive salary increases. I watched him develop confidence in boardrooms and master the political complexities that would eventually attract Reinhardt Tech's attention. I got the executive strategy director position, he announced one evening, practically vibrating with excitement. It's a significant jump, but they specifically wanted someone with my background in cross-platform integration. That's amazing. When do you start? 3 weeks. There's one complication: we need to relocate to Seattle. I know that means rebuilding your client base completely, but this opportunity could change everything for us. I didn't hesitate for even a moment. Of course we're moving. This is exactly what we've been working toward. Relocating meant sacrificing my established client relationships, but I believed completely in our partnership. I referred clients to competitors, terminated my office lease, and spent weeks researching Seattle's investment community to identify potential opportunities. The financial cost was substantial, but watching Ryan excel in his new role felt worth every dollar lost. What I couldn't have predicted was how professional success would gradually alter the fundamental dynamic between us. The man who used to request my opinion on every decision started making choices independently. He'd return home discussing strategic initiatives and corporate restructuring, but when I'd offer perspectives based on my financial expertise, he'd smile politely and redirect the conversation. "The complexities are different at this level," became his standard response when I questioned business strategies that seemed risky from an investment standpoint. "This isn't comparable to your boutique consulting work." The shift accelerated dramatically when Tyler Jameson became his direct supervisor around our 5th wedding anniversary. Suddenly, every conversation included references to Tyler's innovative methodologies, her extensive industry connections, her visionary approach to corporate strategy. "She's absolutely brilliant," Ryan would say, describing some presentation Tyler had delivered. "She approaches problems from angles that completely reframe the entire solution space." I tried being supportive, even suggesting we invite her for dinner. "She sounds like an incredible mentor. I'd love to meet the person who's contributed so much to your career development." "Tyler maintains an extremely demanding schedule," he said quickly. "High-level executive meetings, industry conferences, strategic planning sessions. She probably wouldn't have time for social gatherings." Despite never meeting her, Tyler's influence on our marriage intensified significantly. Ryan began dismissing my professional expertise entirely, characterizing my work as specialized compared to his comprehensive corporate responsibilities. The consultant who'd saved investors millions was suddenly too narrow-focused to understand real business strategy. The ultimate test of our partnership arrived when Ryan received an offer for a major promotion requiring extensive international travel. The opportunity was extraordinary, leading Reinhardt Tech's global expansion with a compensation package that exceeded our combined previous income. "This is our moment," he said, showing me the offer documentation. "Everything we've worked toward our entire marriage." "What about my consulting practice? I've finally rebuilt my client base here. You could scale back temporarily, just until I establish myself in this new role. Then we'll have the financial security for you to be completely selective about projects." That evening at the dinner party, listening to my husband reduce my career to playing around, while strangers nodded sympathetically, I finally understood what our partnership had actually become. The venture capitalist was already turning his attention to someone more interesting, dismissing me as effectively as Ryan had. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror, remembering the ambitious woman who'd once saved pension funds from fraudulent investments. She was still there, buried under years of compromises and diminished expectations. Walking back to the dinner table, I made a decision that would reshape everything. I was done playing small to make Ryan comfortable. The foundation we'd built together was crumbling, but I still had the skills to build something new. The opportunity to rebuild myself came faster than expected. 3 days after that humiliating dinner party, Ryan burst through our front door with an energy I hadn't seen in months. "Tyler wants to meet you," he announced, loosening his tie with one hand while scrolling through his phone with the other. "There's a company holiday party next Friday, and she specifically asked if you'd be attending." My coffee mug paused halfway to my lips. After months of hearing about Tyler Jameson's brilliant strategies and innovative leadership, she suddenly wanted to meet the wife who played around with consulting work. She asked about me? She said it was time she met the woman behind the man, Ryan said with a grin that didn't quite mask something nervous in his eyes. Tyler believes in getting to know her team members' families. She thinks it creates better workplace dynamics. The party was held at the Meridian Hotel, and I spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing my outfit. I settled on a navy dress that struck the right balance between professional and approachable, paired with the pearl earrings Ryan had given me for our anniversary. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman ready to make a good impression on her husband's important boss. Tyler spotted us the moment we entered the elegant ballroom. She glided across the room like she owned it, which, given her position, she practically did. Tall and sharp-featured, she wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than my monthly consulting income. Her handshake was firm, her smile bright, and her eyes calculated every detail of my appearance in the 3 seconds it took her to say hello. "Rebecca." Finally. "Ryan talks about you constantly," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume to ensure nearby colleagues could hear. "You must be so proud of how well he's doing here. We absolutely treasure him." "Thank you. He loves working here." "And you work from home, is that right? How quaint. It must be wonderful to have such flexibility with your schedule." The word quaint landed with surgical precision, managing to diminish my entire career in a single syllable. "I run a financial consulting practice specializing in equity analysis," I said, keeping my tone pleasant. "How interesting. Ryan mentioned you help small investors with their little portfolios. That's so sweet." Tyler's smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered behind her eyes. "Ryan is so lucky to have someone who can be so adaptable with her career. Not every woman could be so flexible." The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes, but I left feeling like I'd been dissected by a professional. Tyler had managed to reduce my business to a hobby, my expertise to helpfulness, and my professional identity to convenience for Ryan's career. All while appearing completely supportive and friendly. "She's impressive," I told Ryan during our drive home, testing his reaction. "Isn't she? Tyler has this way of seeing right to the heart of things. She's been incredible for my career development." 2 weeks later, the first text message arrived. "Happy holidays, Rebecca. Hope you're staying busy with your projects while Ryan handles all the exciting developments here at Reinhardt. So grateful to have such a dedicated team member. Tyler." I stared at the message for a full minute. On the surface, it was perfectly pleasant. Underneath, it positioned my work as mere projects, while emphasizing Ryan's importance to her exciting developments. When I showed Ryan, he barely glanced at it. "That's nice of her to reach out. Tyler's very thoughtful about maintaining relationships with families." The messages continued with clockwork regularity. Valentine's Day brought, "Hope you and Ryan have a lovely celebration. He's been working so hard on our new initiatives. You're so understanding about his dedication to excellence." Easter, "Thinking of you both during this special time. Ryan mentioned how supportive you are of his career growth. So wonderful that he has someone to keep him grounded. You're just so practical." Each message felt like a paper cut, small, precise, and designed to sting just enough to be noticed but not enough to seem intentionally harmful. Tyler had perfected the art of the backhanded compliment, wrapping insults in concern and diminishment in praise. "Am I being oversensitive?" I asked Ryan after the Easter message, which had left me feeling particularly deflated. "Tyler's just being friendly. She includes all the spouses in her communications. You're reading too much into it. But I wasn't reading too much into anything. My years of analyzing corporate behavior had taught me to recognize patterns, and Tyler's pattern was becoming crystal clear. She was systematically repositioning me in Ryan's mind from partner to appendage. The transformation in Ryan's behavior became impossible to ignore. He started coming home with Tyler's opinions on everything from market trends to lifestyle choices. When we discussed upgrading our kitchen, he'd say, "Tyler thinks granite countertops are outdated. She prefers quartz." When I suggested we take a vacation to Italy, he'd respond with, "Tyler says European travel is overrated compared to exploring domestic markets." The most infuriating part was how he'd present Tyler's advice as if it came from some higher authority. "Tyler's insights into work-life balance are really eye-opening," he'd say, completely missing the irony that her advice was pulling him further away from our actual life together. One evening, I tried to discuss a concerning trend I'd noticed in the tech sector's quarterly reports. "The debt-to-equity ratios across the industry are starting to worry me," I said over dinner. "There are signs of over-leveraging that remind me of the patterns I saw before the last market correction." Ryan barely looked up from his phone. "Well, Tyler thinks the current market fundamentals are stronger than they appear. She says people who focus too much on traditional metrics miss the bigger innovation picture." "Tyler's not a financial analyst, Ryan. This is actually my area of expertise. Tyler has an MBA from Wharton and 15 years of corporate strategy experience. She understands market dynamics." The dismissal was complete. My decade of successful consulting, my track record of protecting investors from fraud, my specialized expertise in equity analysis, all of it had become irrelevant compared to Tyler's general business knowledge. Tyler's genius extended beyond just influencing Ryan's opinions. She orchestrated my exclusion from his professional world with surgical precision. Company events would be scheduled for dates when she knew I had client commitments. She'd send invitations for spouses' optional gatherings, then later mention how disappointed she was that I couldn't make it. "The other executives' wives are so involved in our company culture," she told Ryan during one of their frequent phone calls, her voice clearly audible from the kitchen where I was preparing dinner. "Sarah Chin brings homemade cookies to every event, and Michelle Rodriguez organized that wonderful charity drive. It really makes a difference when families are engaged." The message was clear. I was failing as a corporate wife by prioritizing my own work over Ryan's company functions. Tyler would schedule team-building activities that explicitly excluded spouses, then make sure Ryan came home with stories about how much fun everyone had. "Tyler organized this amazing escape room challenge for the leadership team," he'd say. "She's so creative about building camaraderie." Meanwhile, when other companies hosted spouse-inclusive events, Tyler would find reasons why Ryan needed to skip them. "Tyler needs me to review the quarterly projections that night," became his standard excuse. Slowly but methodically, I was being erased from Ryan's professional life, relegated to the role of the stay-at-home wife who couldn't quite keep up with the ambitious corporate crowd. My breaking point came during a phone conversation I accidentally overheard. Ryan was in his home office with the door cracked open, and Tyler's voice carried clearly through the house. "You have so much potential, Ryan. I see you moving into senior leadership within the next 2 years. But you need to surround yourself with people who understand that level of ambition. People who can match your drive and vision." "Rebecca's very supportive of my career," Ryan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Of course she is in her own way. But support and true partnership are different things. You need someone who can elevate your thinking, challenge your assumptions, push you toward excellence. Someone who operates at your level." I stood frozen in our hallway, listening to Tyler systematically dismantle my marriage while positioning herself as the solution to Ryan's professional and personal needs. That night, I started keeping detailed notes of every interaction, every comment, every subtle manipulation. As someone trained in pattern recognition, I finally understood exactly what Tyler was doing. She wasn't just undermining my relationship with Ryan. She was conducting a hostile takeover of my marriage, using the same strategic thinking she'd applied to a corporate acquisition. The most painful part was watching Ryan fall for it completely, interpreting her calculated manipulation as mentorship and professional development. The man who'd once valued my analytical mind couldn't see the analysis that mattered most. Tyler Jameson was systematically destroying us. The notebook filled with Tyler's manipulations was hidden in my desk drawer when Ryan exploded through our front door on that Tuesday evening in March, practically bouncing off the walls with an energy I hadn't seen since his college days. "Pack your best dress," he announced, tossing his briefcase onto the couch with uncharacteristic carelessness. "We're going to the Reinhardt Tech Annual Gala next Saturday." I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing quarterly reports for a potential client. "We're going to what now?" "The company gala. Tyler specifically insisted you come this year. She said it's time you experienced the full Reinhardt culture." Ryan was practically glowing as he loosened his tie. "This is huge, Rebecca. The gala is where they announce major promotions, where the real networking happens. Tyler wouldn't have suggested you attend unless something big was coming." That word, insisted, sent ice water through my veins. After months of strategic exclusion, Tyler suddenly wanted me at the company's most important social event. My analytical mind immediately started calculating possibilities, none of them good. "She insisted?" I repeated carefully. She pulled me aside after the executive meeting today and said, "Ryan, it's time Rebecca joined us for the gala. I have a feeling this year will be especially memorable for both of you." He was rifling through our closet now, pushing hangers aside with unusual enthusiasm. "Where's that dark green dress?" "The one you wore to our anniversary dinner at Giovanni's 2 years ago." I blinked in surprise. Ryan hadn't commented on my clothing choices in months, yet he remembered a specific dress from 2 years ago. "It's in the back, behind the winter coats." "Perfect. You looked incredible in that dress. Tyler mentioned she's looking forward to seeing you in something elegant." The week leading up to the gala felt surreal. Ryan was suddenly attentive in ways that felt almost nostalgic, like he was trying to recapture some version of us that had existed before Tyler's influence poisoned everything. He brought me coffee in the mornings without being asked about my consulting work with genuine interest, and even suggested we practice dancing in our living room. "I want everything to be perfect Saturday night," he said, spinning me awkwardly around our coffee table. "This could be the moment that changes our entire future." Despite every instinct screaming warnings, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe Tyler had realized that excluding me was counterproductive. Maybe she'd decided that accepting me was better than fighting me. Maybe this was her olive branch, her way of acknowledging that I was an important part of Ryan's life whether she liked it or not. I threw myself into preparation with an enthusiasm I hadn't felt in months. The expensive salon downtown gave me a manicure that cost more than I usually spent on groceries. A professional stylist arranged my hair in an elegant updo that made me feel sophisticated and confident. I spent hours researching current tech industry trends, memorizing details about Reinhardt's recent acquisitions and strategic partnerships. "Tell me about the blockchain integration project." I practiced in front of our bathroom mirror. I read the preliminary market analysis was quite promising. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was stepping back into my professional identity. The woman who used to command respect in boardrooms was still there, just buried under months of being dismissed and diminished. I was ready to show Ryan's colleagues that I was more than just a supportive spouse. I was an intelligent partner with valuable insights and professional credibility. The Crestmore Hotel lived up to every description Ryan had given me. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors, and servers in crisp uniforms carried champagne flutes through crowds of elegantly dressed executives and their spouses. Walking through the lobby in my green dress and carefully styled hair, I felt confident and prepared. But the moment we entered the main ballroom, something shifted. Ryan's hand on my back felt performative rather than supportive, like he was playing a role rather than naturally escorting his wife. His eyes immediately found Tyler across the room, and I watched his posture change from relaxed to alert. "There she is," he murmured, and I couldn't tell if he meant it as information or anticipation. Tyler approached us like a queen holding court, her silver dress catching the chandelier light with every calculated step. Her smile was theater bright, visible from across the room. "Rebecca, you actually came." The emphasis on "actually" was subtle but unmistakable, designed to sound surprised and delighted while implying that my attendance was somehow unexpected or uncertain. "Thank you for suggesting I join you," I replied, keeping my voice pleasant and professional. "Well, Ryan deserves to have his +1 here for such a special evening." The phrase, +1, was delivered with surgical precision, reducing me from wife and partner to accessory in front of a room full of Ryan's colleagues. I felt Ryan's hand tighten slightly on my back, but he said nothing to correct Tyler's characterization. "Let me show you to your table," Tyler continued, her voice carrying enough volume to ensure nearby executives could hear every word. "I made sure you were seated with some lovely people who I'm sure will have fascinating things to discuss with you." She guided us through the ballroom like a hostess showing guests to their designated spots. Other couples were finding their seats, checking place cards, settling in for what was clearly going to be an elaborate evening of corporate celebration. "Here we are," Tyler announced, gesturing toward an elegantly set round table near the center of the room. "Ryan, you're right here next to me at the head table, of course." My stomach dropped. "We're not sitting together?" "Oh, didn't Ryan explain? Executives sit at the leadership table. Spouses have their own seating arrangements." Tyler's tone was apologetic but firm, as if this was standard protocol rather than another strategic separation. I looked at Ryan, expecting him to object or at least appear surprised by this arrangement. Instead, he was already moving toward the head table, his attention focused on Tyler's explanation of the evening's agenda. "Your place card should be right around here somewhere," Tyler said, scanning the elegant table settings with theatrical concern. I began checking the small, cream-colored cards at each place setting, reading names of people I didn't recognize. Jennifer Walsh, Marketing Coordinator. David Kim, Regional Sales Manager. Sarah Chin, Executive Assistant. And then I found mine. The card was identical to all the others. Cream cardstock with elegant calligraphy in deep blue ink. But instead of my name it read, "Pathetic Gold Digger Nobody." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I stared at the card, reading it again to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The professional presentation somehow made it worse. This wasn't a spontaneous insult scrawled in anger. This was a carefully planned humiliation, designed and executed with the same attention to detail as the rest of the evening's arrangements. The laughter started as a ripple and built to a wave. The other people at the table had seen the card, and their reaction ranged from shocked gasps to poorly concealed amusement. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my goodness, did you see what her place card says?" "Still clinging to him after all this time?" a woman's voice said behind me, followed by more laughter. The sound grew louder as more people noticed the commotion and came over to see what was causing such a stir. Within moments, half the ballroom was either staring at me or actively laughing at the elegant calligraphy that had reduced me to a punchline. I turned to Ryan, expecting anger, outrage, or at minimum some sign that he was as shocked by this cruelty as I was. Instead, I found him staring at his water glass like it contained the mysteries of the universe, his face carefully neutral, his shoulders tense with what I realized wasn't surprise but discomfort at being caught in the middle of something he'd known was coming. "Ryan," I said quietly, giving him one last chance to defend me, to show some sign that the man I'd married was still somewhere inside the stranger wearing his face. He couldn't meet my eyes. His silence stretched across the laughter and whispered comments, speaking louder than any words could have. In that moment, I understood with crystalline clarity that this wasn't just Tyler's masterpiece of public destruction. Ryan was a willing participant in my humiliation. The silence wasn't shock. It was complicity. The man I'd supported through every career challenge, the partner I'd sacrificed my professional ambitions for, the husband I'd loved and trusted for 9 years, couldn't find the courage to defend me against the cruelest public humiliation I'd ever experienced. I looked around the ballroom at the faces surrounding me, some laughing, some uncomfortable, all witnessing my complete and utter destruction. The weeks of preparation, the hope I'd allowed myself to feel, the confidence I'd carefully rebuilt, all of it crumbled into dust. But as I stood there holding that place card, something else crystallized inside me. The woman they were laughing at, the pathetic gold digger nobody, had skills they couldn't imagine. And Tyler Jameson had just made the biggest mistake of her carefully calculated career. I walked toward the exit with my head held high, and as I passed the CEO who was chuckling at Tyler's brilliant joke, I leaned close to her ear. "I'd check your stock prices if I were you," I whispered. The taxi driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror during the silent ride home from the Crestmore, probably wondering why a woman in an expensive dress was sitting in his backseat with tears streaming down her face. I didn't speak until we pulled into my driveway, and even then I could only manage a whispered thank you as I handed him cash. Ryan's car wasn't in the driveway. He was probably still at the gala, probably celebrating with Tyler and the colleagues who'd found my humiliation so entertaining. The house felt different when I walked through the front door, smaller somehow, like it belonged to someone else's life. I spent Sunday in bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of Saturday night. The laughter. Ryan's silence. The CEO's smirk when I whispered my threat about stock prices. By Sunday evening, something had crystallized inside me. The woman they'd humiliated wasn't pathetic or nobody. She was dangerous, and they had no idea what they'd unleashed. Monday morning, I sat in my home office staring at my laptop like it was a time machine capable of transporting me back to the person I used to be. The screen was black, reflecting my face back at me, but I could see beyond that reflection to the woman who'd once saved pension funds from fraudulent investments. My fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory I didn't realize I'd retained. Password after password came back to me as I accessed databases I'd maintained but barely touched in months. Bloomberg Terminal. C. Edgar. Corporate filings databases. Industry analysis platforms. The subscriptions I'd kept active, just in case, suddenly felt like the smartest money I'd ever spent. The first thing I opened was Reinhardt Tech's most recent 10K filing. As I scrolled through pages of corporate legal language and financial tables, something I hadn't felt in years began burning in my chest. Professional hunger. The thrill of the hunt. The satisfaction of seeing patterns that others missed. "Let's see what you've been hiding," I whispered to my screen. Within an hour, I found the first irregularity. Executive stock option grants that were dated suspiciously close to major announcements that would boost share prices. The timing wasn't technically illegal, but it showed a pattern of executives positioning themselves to profit from information before it became public. I pulled up Tyler's employment records through public filings. Her signature appeared on documents approving these option grants. She'd been at Reinhardt for 18 months, and in that time the questionable practices had accelerated dramatically. My coffee grew cold as I dug deeper into quarterly earnings reports. Revenue recognition that pushed the boundaries of accounting standards. Expenses that were curiously shifted between reporting periods. Research and development costs that seemed to disappear and reappear in different categories without adequate explanation. Sloppy, I muttered, highlighting another discrepancy. Overconfident and sloppy. By Tuesday afternoon, I had enough material to fill a regulatory complaint. But a complaint would take months to investigate, and I wanted faster results. I needed a different approach. The anonymous investor forum post took me 3 hours to craft. I chose username EquityWatchdog47 and wrote an analysis that would be impossible for serious investors to ignore. Red flags at Reinhardt Tech. A deep dive into concerning financial patterns. I included charts showing the correlation between executive stock transactions and company announcements. Graphs illustrating the unusual timing of revenue recognition. Tables comparing Reinhardt's accounting practices to industry standards. Everything was documented with precise citations to public filings and regulatory guidelines. The post went live Wednesday morning at 6 a.m., time to catch investors before market open. By noon, it had been shared across 3 major investment forums and cited in 2 financial blogs. Wednesday evening brought the first surprise. An email to a secure account I'd created for the anonymous posts. "Whoever you are, thank you. I've been suspicious of Reinhardt's numbers for months but didn't have the expertise to document it properly. Your analysis is spot on. There's more where that came from if you're interested." A concerned insider. The attached documents made my pulse quicken. Internal emails discussing ways to optimize quarterly reporting. Meeting notes about delaying certain expense recognitions. Most damaging of all, a thread where Tyler explicitly discussed timing announcements to maximize the impact on stock price around executive option grants. "We can shift the development costs to next quarter and announce the beta release this Friday," one email read. "That should give the stock a nice bump right before the option grants vest." Tyler's response was even more damning. "Perfect. The board won't question the accounting treatment if the results look good." Thursday brought another bombshell. Someone had forwarded me a screenshot from Reinhardt's internal Slack channel, posted Saturday night during the gala. "Tyler, did you all see Rebecca's face when she found her place card? Priceless. Face with tears of joy. Serendipity marketing. I can't believe you actually did it. Savage. Tyler. Ryan said she needed to understand her place. Mission accomplished. She won't be bothering us with her professional insights anymore. The screenshot was time-stamped 11:47 p.m. Saturday, less than 2 hours after I'd left the gala. Tyler had been bragging about humiliating me while I was crying in a taxi. I saved the screenshot and added it to my growing file. The pattern was becoming clear. Tyler wasn't just manipulative in her personal relationships. She was reckless and arrogant in her professional conduct too. Friday morning, I published a follow-up post incorporating the new evidence. This one was titled Culture and Conduct: When Leadership Failure Extends Beyond Numbers. The response was immediate and explosive. Financial journalists started calling Reinhardt Tech's corporate communications department. Investment analysts began downgrading their stock recommendations. Regulatory bodies opened preliminary inquiries. I watched it all unfold from my home office, sipping coffee and feeling more alive than I had in months. Every news alert, every dropping stock price point, every analyst comment questioning Reinhardt's practices felt like validation of everything Tyler and Ryan had dismissed about my capabilities. By Friday afternoon, Reinhardt Tech's stock price had dropped 12%. The company issued a statement about addressing recent concerns raised by market analysts and announced they were conducting a thorough internal review of accounting practices. I knew that internal review would find exactly what I'd already documented. Tyler's fingerprints were all over the questionable decisions, and her arrogance had left a paper trail that would be impossible to explain away. The anonymous whistleblower emails were flooding in now. Current employees, former employees, vendors who'd witnessed questionable practices. Everyone wanted to share what they knew with the person who'd finally spoken up about Reinhardt's problems. One message particularly caught my attention. I'm a junior accountant at Reinhardt. Tyler Jameson has been pressuring our department to manipulate quarter-end numbers for months. I've been documenting everything because I was scared of losing my job if I reported it. Your posts gave me the courage to contact the SEC directly. Thank you for giving us a voice. Saturday evening, exactly 1 week after the gala, I poured myself a glass of wine and reviewed the week's accomplishments. Reinhardt Tech was under investigation by 3 regulatory bodies. Their stock price was in free fall. Tyler's professional reputation was crumbling as journalists dug deeper into the culture she'd created. The woman they'd called a pathetic gold digger nobody had triggered the biggest corporate scandal in the tech industry that year. And I was just getting started. Ryan still hadn't come home. According to his LinkedIn status, he was managing crisis communications for Reinhardt Tech. I wondered if he had any idea that his dismissed wife was the anonymous analyst bringing down his beloved company. As I closed my laptop that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Professional satisfaction. The equity watchdog was back and she was hungrier than ever. The truth had momentum now, rolling downhill like an avalanche. All I had to do was step back and watch Tyler Jameson's carefully constructed world collapse under the weight of her own arrogance. Sunday morning brought the phone call I'd been waiting for. My secure line rang at 7:23 a.m., and the voice on the other end belonged to Marcus Chin, a financial journalist from the Wall Street Journal. I'm trying to reach Equity Watchdog 47, he said. I know this is unconventional, but your Reinhardt Tech analysis has caught significant attention. We'd like to expand on your findings for a front-page story. I'd been expecting this moment since Friday's market close. What kind of expansion? We've independently verified most of your documentation. Our investigation team has uncovered additional evidence that supports your conclusions about questionable accounting practices. We want to run a comprehensive exposé, but we need to ensure our source material is bulletproof. 20 minutes later, I'd anonymously provided Marcus with additional documentation that would make his article unassailable. The Wall Street Journal's credibility would amplify my findings beyond anything I could accomplish through forum posts. Monday's headline read, Tech darling Reinhardt under federal investigation for accounting irregularities. The article detailed everything I'd discovered, plus information their investigative team had gathered independently. Tyler's name appeared 17 times, each mention more damaging than the last. By 10 a.m., Reinhardt Tech stock had dropped another 18%. Trading was halted twice as sell orders flooded the market. I watched the chaos unfold from my home office, sipping coffee that tasted like victory. The first news alert about Tyler personally arrived at 11:47 a.m. Reinhardt Tech executive Tyler Jameson placed on administrative leave pending investigation. I screenshot the notification and saved it in a folder labeled Justice Served. Ryan's key turned in the front door at 2 p.m., 3 hours earlier than usual. His footsteps on our hardwood floors sounded heavy, defeated. I heard him drop his briefcase by the entrance, something he never did. "Rebecca." His voice carried a vulnerability I hadn't heard in years. In the office, I called back, not looking up from my laptop where I was tracking Reinhardt's continued stock decline. He appeared in my doorway looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, his expensive suit wrinkled. "We need to talk," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk without invitation. "About what?" "About Tyler. About the investigation. About everything that's happening at work." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I don't know how much you've heard, but it's bad. Really bad." I minimized my browser window and gave him my full attention. "What kind of bad?" "The SEC is launching a formal investigation. The FBI seized documents from Tyler's office this morning. There are rumors about criminal charges." He looked at me with desperate eyes. "I've been working with Tyler for 2 years, Rebecca. If they find evidence of intentional fraud, anyone associated with her decisions could be implicated." "That sounds serious." "It is serious. My career could be over. Everything we've built together could disappear." He leaned forward, reaching for my hand across the desk. "I need your analytical expertise. You're the smartest person I know when it comes to financial investigations. Could you help me understand what they might be looking for?" The irony was breathtaking. The man who'd dismissed my professional insights for months was now begging for the expertise he'd called niche and small scale. "Why would you need my help? Doesn't Tyler have everything under control?" Ryan's laugh was bitter. "Tyler's completely falling apart. She's blaming everyone except herself, claiming she was just following industry standards. But some of the documentation. Rebecca, I think she might have been manipulating numbers deliberately. That would be securities fraud." "I know what it would be." His voice cracked with stress. "I'm scared, Rebecca. For the first time in my career, I'm genuinely terrified about my professional future." I studied his face, seeing real fear behind the desperation. Part of me felt sympathy for the man I'd once loved unconditionally. But a larger part felt cold satisfaction at watching his world crumble the same way mine had at that gala. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Help me distance myself from Tyler's decisions. Review the documents I was involved with and help me understand which ones might look problematic to investigators." He paused, swallowing hard. "I know I haven't been the best husband lately. I know I haven't appreciated your professional skills the way I should have. But we're a team, right? Partners for life." The words he'd spoken 9 years ago in that university parking lot felt hollow now, tainted by years of dismissal and culminating in his silence during my public humiliation. "When did you last consider us partners, Ryan?" He blinked, clearly unprepared for the question. "What do you mean? When did you last ask for my opinion on something important? When did you last value my professional expertise? When did you last defend me when someone attacked my credibility?" His face went pale as understanding dawned. "Rebecca, if this is about the gala..." "It's about everything, Ryan. The gala was just the final confirmation of what we'd become." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder I'd been preparing for this conversation. Inside were copies of apartment listings, consultations with divorce attorneys, and financial statements showing exactly how much my consulting business could generate if I focused on it full-time. "What is this?" he asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. "My exit strategy. I've been rebuilding my professional network while watching your precious mentor destroy her career through her own arrogance." I handed him the top document, a consulting contract with a hedge fund worth more than his annual salary. 3 former clients want to hire me full-time. My reputation for integrity and analytical precision never disappeared, Ryan. I just buried it to support a husband who stopped seeing my value. His hands shook as he read the contract terms. "You're leaving me. I'm saving myself. There's a difference. But Tyler's investigation, my career, everything's falling apart." Tyler's investigation exists because someone with my skills decided to examine her practices closely. Her career is ending because she was sloppy and arrogant. Your career is in jeopardy because you chose loyalty to a corrupt mentor over respect for your wife. Ryan stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact moment he began connecting dots he should have connected years ago. You know something about this investigation, don't you? I closed my laptop and stood up. I know that truth has a way of surfacing when someone with the right expertise decides to dig for it. Rebecca, what did you do? I reminded everyone that the pathetic gold digger nobody from the Gala actually has a PhD in financial analysis and a decade of experience exposing corporate fraud. I walked to our bedroom and began pulling clothes from my closet. I did what I should have done years ago. I stopped hiding my capabilities to make other people comfortable. Ryan followed me, watching as I methodically folded clothes into suitcases with the same precision I'd once used to analyze fraudulent financial statements. You can't just leave. We can work through this. Can we? When did you plan to start respecting my professional expertise? After Tyler's criminal trial? After your career recovers from association with a fraud? After you finally decide I'm worth defending? He sat on our bed looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I know I messed up. I know I should have said something at the Gala. But Tyler said it was just a joke, that you'd understand the humor. Tyler told you about the place card in advance. It wasn't a question. Ryan's silence confirmed what I'd suspected since that night. She showed you the card before the event, didn't she? You knew I was walking into that humiliation and you said nothing. She said it would be funny. She said you'd laugh about it later. I stopped packing and looked at him directly. Did you really believe that? Or did you just not care enough to stop it? He couldn't meet my eyes, which was answer enough. I zipped my suitcase and headed for the door. On our kitchen counter, I left a note with words I'd been composing for weeks. Ryan, it's not the insult that broke us. It's the silence that followed. The woman you dismissed is the same woman who just brought down your mentor's empire. Maybe next time you'll remember that underestimating people has consequences. Rebecca. Walking out of that house felt like stepping into sunlight after years in shadow. My phone buzzed with another news alert. Former Reinhardt executive Tyler Jameson under criminal investigation for securities fraud. The equity watchdog was fully awake now, and she was just getting started. The apartment I found was everything our house had never been. Bright, clean, and entirely mine. Floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room overlooked the city skyline, and morning sunlight streamed across hardwood floors that bore no memory of arguments or silent dinners. The kitchen was small but efficient, perfect for someone who planned to spend most of her time building a career rather than hosting dinner parties for people who didn't respect her. Moving in took exactly one afternoon. 9 years of marriage and everything I truly wanted fit into my car in 6 boxes. I hung my diplomas on the wall of my new home office. The PhD in financial analysis from Northwestern, the Certified Fraud Examiner certificate, the awards from industry organizations that had recognized my work before I'd buried it to support Ryan's ambitions. Welcome to your new life, Rebecca, I said to my reflection in the bathroom mirror that first night. The woman staring back at me looked different already. Shoulders straighter, eyes clearer, mouth set in determined lines rather than the apologetic softness I'd worn for years. Tuesday morning brought the phone call that would reshape everything. Patricia Morrison from Whitfield Capital had been trying to reach me for 3 days. Rebecca, I've been following your work for years, especially your recent analysis of tech sector irregularities, she said without preamble. We need someone with your expertise as our new research director. The compensation package starts at $200,000, plus bonuses tied to fund performance. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. You want to hire me full-time? We want to build an entire research division around your analytical approach. Your reputation for uncovering problems before they hit headlines is exactly what our investors need in this market. 3 weeks later, I walked into Whitfield Capital's glass-walled offices wearing a navy suit that fit perfectly and confidence I'd forgotten I possessed. My business cards read Rebecca Chin, Director of Equity Research, and seeing my name in elegant lettering felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost years ago. My first assignment was evaluating a biotech company as a potential acquisition target. Within hours of diving into their financial statements, I found patterns that reminded me of my early consulting days. Revenue recognition that seemed designed to impress rather than inform, Research costs that moved between categories without clear justification. This company is cooking their books, I told Patricia during our afternoon meeting. Their Phase 2 trial results don't justify the revenue projections, and they're hiding development failures in subsidiary accounting. How certain are you? Certain enough to stake my reputation on it. I slid my analysis across her desk. Give me one more week to document everything, and you'll have a report that saves your fund millions. Patricia smiled. This is exactly why we hired you. Working again in a professional environment where my expertise was valued felt like oxygen after years of suffocation. My colleagues treated me as an equal partner in complex financial decisions. During strategy meetings, people leaned forward when I spoke rather than politely waiting for me to finish. My insights shaped investment decisions worth tens of millions of dollars. Rebecca's analysis just saved us from a catastrophic pharmaceutical investment, Patricia announced during our monthly partners meeting. Her due diligence uncovered accounting irregularities that would have cost the fund approximately $40 million. The applause felt genuine, earned, real. For the first time in years, I was being recognized for the work I actually did rather than dismissed as someone who played around with numbers. The Google alert about Tyler arrived on a Thursday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports. Former tech executive Tyler Jameson indicted on federal securities fraud charges. The accompanying photograph showed a woman I barely recognized. Gone were the designer suits and commanding presence that had once intimidated me. Tyler stood outside the federal courthouse wearing flat shoes and a cheap blazer, her shoulders hunched in defeat. The woman who had built her career on projecting invincibility looked small and ordinary. The charges were serious: falsifying investor disclosures, manipulating earnings reports, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Each count carried potential prison time and guaranteed professional destruction. I read the article twice, feeling something I hadn't expected, not triumph but quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served not through revenge but through simple exposure of truth. Tyler's arrogance and sloppy practices had created the evidence that brought her down. I'd simply illuminated what was already there. The comment section was brutal but predictable. "Isn't this the executive who humiliated that woman at the company gala?" one reader wrote. "Karma has an interesting sense of timing." Another comment made me pause. I worked at Reinhardt during the Tyler era. She created a toxic culture where bullying was disguised as high-performance standards. Glad someone finally held her accountable. Tyler had built her entire professional identity on manipulation and cruelty, and now that foundation was crumbling completely. The same strategic thinking she'd used to undermine my marriage had made her overconfident in her financial misconduct. 6 months after leaving Ryan, I realized the transformation was complete. The woman who had once been dismissed as a pathetic gold digger nobody was now leading investment decisions for one of the city's most respected funds. My analysis influenced portfolio strategies worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Industry publications quoted my research and other financial firms tried to recruit me monthly. But the professional success was only part of the story. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based entirely on my own preferences and priorities. My apartment reflected my taste rather than compromises with someone else's vision. My schedule revolved around work I found challenging rather than supporting someone else's ambitions. Friday evenings, I'd sit on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights twinkle below and marveling at how quiet life could be without constant tension and dismissal. No more analyzing every conversation for hidden criticisms. No more wondering if my professional insights would be valued or dismissed. No more walking on eggshells around someone else's fragile ego. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, requiring only my signature to make official what had been emotionally finished months ago. Ryan had included a handwritten note that I read once before filing it away. "Rebecca, I know I can never undo the damage I caused. You were always the stronger partner in our marriage. I just wasn't smart enough to see it until it was too late. I hope you find the respect and recognition you deserve. Ryan." The apology felt hollow after years of dismissal, but I appreciated the acknowledgement. Ryan was facing his own consequences: unemployment, professional disgrace by association with Tyler, and the loss of a wife whose expertise could have saved his career if he'd bothered to value it. As I signed the divorce papers, I thought about the couple we'd once been, Two ambitious students with dollar store champagne and unlimited dreams. That partnership had been real, but it had also been fragile. When success and outside influence tested our foundation, we discovered it wasn't strong enough to survive. But from the ashes of that failed marriage, something better had emerged. Not revenge or vindication, but resurrection. The woman Tyler had tried to diminish was thriving in ways neither she nor Ryan could have imagined. The truth had done all the work. I'd simply provided it with the opportunity to shine. If this story of quiet justice had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Rebecca whispered, "I'd check your stock prices if I were you," to the CEO, knowing exactly what was coming next. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.
I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 28 years old, living what seemed like a perfectly normal life in Boston. My graphic design career was thriving, my apartment cozy, my life orderly, until that night. At 2 a.m., violent knocking shattered my sleep. Opening the door, I found my sister Haley collapsed, barely breathing. As I pulled her inside, my phone buzzed. Mom's text made my blood freeze. "Don't help that cripple." She made her choice. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about family loyalty was thrown into question. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had to choose between family expectations and doing what's right in your heart. Growing up in suburban Chicago, our family looked picture perfect from the outside. My parents, Sandra and William Mitchell, maintained an immaculate home in an excellent school district. Dad was a respected corporate attorney, Mom a pediatric nurse who quit working to raise us properly. They hosted dinner parties where guests marveled at our family's accomplishments, especially mine. From an early age, I was the perfect child. Straight A's, debate team captain, accepted to Northwestern with a partial scholarship. My parents beamed with pride at every award ceremony, every recognition. Cassandra knows how to apply herself. They'd tell anyone who would listen. Then there was Haley, for years younger than me. Where I was methodical and organized, Haley was spontaneous and creative. Her room was a riot of art supplies, her schedule fluid rather than structured. She had this infectious laugh that could fill our entire house. When we were younger, I adored her free spirit. We were different but complementary. I helped her study for tests. She taught me to see beauty in unexpected places. But our parents never saw Haley's gifts the way I did. Where they praised my academic achievements, they criticized her B grades as not living up to potential. Her artwork was a nice hobby, but not practical. Every parent-teacher conference became an opportunity to remind Haley how she failed to measure up to her older sister. "Why can't you be more like Cassandra?" became the refrain of Haley's childhood. I didn't realize how damaging this was until later. As a teenager, I sometimes even enjoyed the favoritism, the golden child status. It's uncomfortable to admit that now, but it's the truth. I didn't understand the toll it was taking on my sister, how the constant comparisons were eroding her self-worth. Everything changed when Haley was 19. She was driving home from community college when another driver ran a red light and T-boned her car. The injuries weren't visibly catastrophic, no broken spine, no paralysis, but the aftermath was insidious. Haley developed chronic pain syndrome, particularly in her back and legs. Some days were manageable, others left her unable to get out of bed. My parents' response was immediate disbelief. "You're fine, stop being dramatic," Mom would say when Haley couldn't attend family functions. "This is just another way to get attention," Dad commented when Haley had to drop classes because sitting through lectures became unbearable. I witnessed their dismissal, but didn't fight hard enough against it. I'd offer weak defenses, "Maybe she really is hurting," but would back down when my parents unleashed their counterarguments. They were so convinced, so authoritative in their certainty that Haley was exaggerating. Mom, despite being a former nurse, was the worst. "I know what real pain looks like," she'd declare, as if pain were only legitimate when visible like a broken bone or a bleeding wound. After a while, they stopped taking Haley to specialists when the diagnoses confirmed her chronic pain condition. Doctor shopping, they called it, convinced Haley was manipulating medical professionals to validate her supposed disability. They refused to help her apply for disability benefits, calling it giving up on life before it even starts. When I graduated college and landed my first graphic design job in Boston 3 years ago, I felt both excitement and guilt. I was escaping the growing tension at home, the daily battles over Haley's health. I promised to stay in touch, to visit often. But life got busy, visits became less frequent, and our once close relationship dwindled to occasional texts and monthly calls. The distance made it easier to believe what my parents told me, that Haley was improving but choosing to remain dependent. That she could work if she really wanted to. That their tough love approach was necessary to prevent her from settling into victimhood. I knew Haley was still living with our parents, unable to sustain employment long enough to support herself independently. I knew she had been denied disability benefits twice, largely because our parents refused to provide supporting documentation or transportation to evaluations. I knew she was isolated, with former friends moving on with their lives while hers remained stagnant. What I didn't know, what I chose not to see, was how much worse things had become. Looking back, there were signs in our conversations: Haley's increasing reluctance to discuss her daily life, her vague responses when I asked about her medical care, the way her voice would drop to a whisper when our parents were nearby. I hadn't seen Haley in person for almost a year before she appeared at my door that night. The last time we were together was at Thanksgiving, where she barely ate and excused herself repeatedly to stretch her legs in private. I noticed she'd lost weight, but when I mentioned it, Mom quickly interrupted to say Haley was finally taking care of herself and not using food for comfort anymore. I accepted this explanation because it was easier than the alternative, that something was seriously wrong and I was doing nothing to help. That night, as I stared at my sister's collapsed form in my doorway, I realized how badly I had failed her. Wednesday night had been like any other. I was working late on a rebrand project for a major client, the kind of assignment that could elevate my standing at the design agency. My apartment was quiet except for the occasional click of my mouse and the ambient music playing softly through my speakers. Boston city lights twinkled outside my window as the night deepened. By 1 a.m., my eyes were burning from staring at the screen. I finally closed my laptop, stretched my stiff shoulders, and shuffled through my nighttime routine. Teeth brushed, face washed, I collapsed into bed just before 1:30, setting my alarm for 7 a.m. Sleep came quickly. The pounding jolted me awake. Disoriented, I thought it was part of a dream until it came again, urgent, desperate knocking that made my apartment door rattle in its frame. My bedside clock read 2:07 a.m. My heart raced as I sat up. Living alone as a woman in the city, late-night visitors triggered immediate alarm bells. I considered calling the building security or even 911, but something about the frantic rhythm of the knocking stopped me. It didn't sound threatening, it sounded desperate. Cautiously, I approached my door and peered through the peephole. The hallway light illuminated a hunched figure I barely recognized at first. Then she looked up, and despite the distortion of the glass, I knew those eyes. "Haley?" I called, quickly undoing the deadbolt and chain. When I opened the door, my sister was clinging to the wall for support, her body seemingly unable to hold itself upright. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken and glassy with fever. Her normally auburn hair hung limp and unwashed around her shoulders. She wore mismatched clothes, sweatpants too large for her frame, a thin jacket inappropriate for the October chill, and one regular sneaker paired with what looked like a medical walking shoe. "Cass," she whispered, her voice raspy. I didn't know where else. Before she could finish, her knees buckled. I lunged forward, catching her before she hit the floor. She was alarmingly light, bones pressing against my hands as I supported her weight. The heat radiating from her body, even through her clothes, signaled a significant fever. "Jesus, Haley, what happened to you?" I maneuvered her inside, kicking the door closed behind us. "How did you even get here?" Her breathing was labored as I helped her to my couch. "Bus," she managed. "Then, taxi." Use the emergency card you gave me last year. I had almost forgotten about that. A prepaid credit card with $300 I'd given her for emergencies when I realized our parents had taken control of her regular bank account. The fact that she'd saved it all this time, only to use it to flee to me, made my stomach clench with guilt. They won't let me get better, she murmured, her eyes struggling to focus on me. Had to escape, before it was too late. A small backpack hung from her shoulder, which I gently removed. Inside were minimal belongings, a change of underwear, a toothbrush, her ID, and several prescription bottles. I picked up one of the bottles, trying to make sense of the medication name I didn't recognize. Haley, these aren't your usual meds, I said, examining the label. I think this is an antipsychotic. Her eyes filled with tears. They tell the doctors I'm crazy. That I make up the pain. Mom crushes pills into my food when she thinks I don't notice. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I glanced down to see a text from my mother, and the words knocked the air from my lungs. If that ungrateful girl showed up at your place, don't help that cripple. She made her choice. Send her back or we'll hold you responsible too. As I stared at the message in disbelief, more texts followed. She's manipulating you. Always has. Your sister needs psychological help, not coddling. We've sacrificed everything for her, and this is how she repays us. Don't throw away your relationship with us for her delusions. My hands shook as I set the phone down. Everything I thought I knew about my family was crumbling. All those years of believing my parents were strict but loving, that they wanted what was best for both of us despite their flawed approach, it all seemed like a carefully constructed lie. Haley's eyes had closed, her breathing becoming more shallow. When I touched her forehead, it burned against my palm. She murmured something incoherent, her body occasionally twitching. Haley? Haley, can you hear me? I gently shook her shoulder, but got no response. For a brief, terrible moment, I found myself considering my mother's words. Was Haley manipulating me? Was this some elaborate performance to gain sympathy? The thought made me sick as soon as it formed. This was my sister, clearly suffering, possibly dying on my couch. And I was still giving our parents the benefit of the doubt. When Haley's breathing became increasingly labored and she wouldn't respond to my voice, I made my decision. I picked up my phone, ignored the 3 new messages from my mother, and dialed 911. I need an ambulance, I told the operator, my voice steadier than I felt. My sister is unresponsive with a high fever. She may have been given medication that wasn't prescribed for her condition. As I gave them my address and answered their questions, I watched Haley's chest rise and fall with each difficult breath. I had spent years trusting the wrong people. I wouldn't make that mistake again. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their efficiency both reassuring and terrifying. They asked rapid-fire questions I struggled to answer. What medications was she taking? Did she have any allergies? When did her symptoms begin? The gaps in my knowledge about my own sister's medical history felt like indictments. BP is 90/50, pulse 120 and thready, temp 103.8. One paramedic called to the other as they worked. The concern in their voices was evident even through their professional demeanor. Ma'am, we need to transport her immediately, the female paramedic told me as they transferred Haley to a stretcher. Will you be riding with us or following? I'm coming with her, I said, grabbing my purse and keys. I wouldn't let Haley out of my sight again. In the ambulance, I held Haley's limp hand while the paramedics inserted in 4 and attached monitoring equipment. The wail of the siren above us seemed to punctuate the gravity of the situation. Has she been sick long? The paramedic asked as he checked Haley's pupils. I don't know, I admitted, shame washing over me. We haven't seen each other in person for almost a year. She lives with our parents in Chicago. I didn't know she was coming until she showed up tonight. The paramedic's expression remained neutral, but I felt judged nonetheless. What kind of sister doesn't know if her sibling has been ill? Massachusetts General Hospital's emergency department was a blur of activity. Haley was immediately wheeled away behind double doors while I was directed to a waiting area and given clipboard after clipboard of forms to fill out. I left most fields blank, realizing how little I knew about Haley's current medical situation. The waiting room was purgatory. Every time the doors opened, I looked up expectantly, only to see someone else's name being called. My phone continued to buzz with messages from my parents, growing increasingly threatening. "We're calling the police to report Haley missing. Your father is contacting his attorney friend. You have no idea what you're getting involved in." I silenced my phone and slipped it into my pocket. 3 hours into waiting, exhaustion and anxiety collided. I found myself staring at a children's show playing on the waiting room TV, memories flooding back unbidden. Haley at 6, showing me a drawing she'd made of our family, stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. Mom taping my straight-A report card to the refrigerator, while Haley's B-average report disappeared into a drawer. Haley crying after her middle school art show, where our parents had shown up late and left early. Me at my high school graduation, the center of attention, while Haley quietly took photos from the sidelines. The gradual dimming of the light in my sister's eyes as year after year, she was deemed less worthy of attention, of love. "Ms. Mitchell." I startled at the sound of my name. A doctor in blue scrubs stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "I'm Dr. Evans. Your sister has been stabilized, but I need to speak with you about her condition." He led me to a small consultation room and closed the door before sitting across from me. His expression was grave. "Ms. Mitchell, your sister is seriously ill. She's severely malnourished and dehydrated, with a BMI that indicates prolonged nutritional deficiency. She has an untreated urinary tract infection that has likely progressed to her kidneys, which is causing the high fever. We've started her on 4 antibiotics and fluids." I nodded numbly, trying to process the information. "What's most concerning," he continued, "are the results of her initial blood work. We've found several medications in her system that wouldn't be indicated for her chronic pain condition. In fact, some of them could potentially worsen her symptoms or mask important warning signs." "What medications?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "We found traces of Haldol, which is a powerful antipsychotic, as well as several sedatives. There's also evidence she's been given tricyclic antidepressants in doses that would be considered excessive for pain management." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "She told me our mother was putting medication in her food. I found prescription bottles in her bag." Dr. Evans's expression darkened. "Ms. Mitchell, I need to be direct with you. What you're describing, combined with your sister's physical condition, raises serious concerns about potential medical abuse." "Has your sister been under someone else's care? Someone who would have control over her medication?" "Our parents," I whispered. "She's been living with them since her accident 4 years ago. They're the ones who manage her medical care." The doctor made a note on his clipboard. "I'm going to have to report this to the appropriate authorities. In cases like this, we're mandatory reporters." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. A woman in plain clothes entered, showing a badge. "I'm Officer Ramirez. The nurse called us about a potential abuse situation." The next hour was a nightmare of statements and questions. I showed Officer Ramirez the text messages from my mother, explained what little I knew about Haley's living situation, and admitted my own absence from her life. Each admission felt like tearing open a wound. "Has your sister ever mentioned abuse before tonight?" Officer Ramirez asked. "Not directly," I said, shame burning my cheeks. "She would say things like, 'Mom and Dad don't believe me,' or 'they think I'm making it up for attention.' I thought they were being stubborn or old-fashioned about invisible disabilities. I never imagined they were actually." I couldn't finish the sentence. My phone, which I had placed on the table, lit up with an incoming call from Dad. Officer Ramirez noticed. "You can answer if you want. It might be helpful to hear what they have to say now." With shaking hands, I put the phone on speaker. "Cassandra Elizabeth Mitchell," my father's voice boomed, using my full name as he did when I was in trouble as a child. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Dad, Haley is in the hospital. She's very sick." "Of course she is," he scoffed. "She's always sick when it gets her what she wants. I thought you were smarter than this." "The doctors found medications in her system that could have killed her," I said, my voice gaining strength from the officer's presence. Medications she shouldn't have been taking. There was a pause before he spoke again, his tone lowered but more menacing. You're interfering in things you don't understand. Your mother and I have been dealing with Haley's mental health issues for years. Those medications were prescribed by professionals. For what condition, Dad? Because they're not appropriate for chronic pain. That's between her doctors and us. We're her legal caregivers. You're just stirring up trouble, and I promise you'll regret it. We've already spoken to Stanley. Stanley was his friend, a partner at a prestigious law firm. He says we have grounds to sue for interference and defamation if you continue with these wild accusations. Officer Ramirez signaled for me to keep him talking. Why did Mom tell me not to help Haley? Why did she call her a cripple? I asked. Another pause. Your mother was upset. Haley stole money from us before running away. She's been increasingly paranoid, making up stories about us poisoning her. It's part of her delusions. So Mom didn't text me saying not to help that cripple? A longer pause. I'm sure that's not exactly what was said. You're twisting things, just like your sister. Officer Ramirez motioned for me to wrap up the call. Dad, I can't talk anymore right now. I'm staying with Haley. Cassandra, listen to me very carefully. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. If you choose her over your family, there will be consequences. Your job, your reputation, everything you've worked for, we can make it all disappear. Think very carefully about whose side you're on. The call ended, and I looked up at Officer Ramirez, whose expression had hardened. That was illuminating, she said, making notes. We'll need a copy of those text messages, and I'd like you to come down to the station tomorrow to make a formal statement. After the officer left, a social worker named Maya came to speak with me. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Your sister has been trying to leave your parents' home for months, she explained, reviewing notes on her tablet. According to the initial interview our colleague conducted while you were speaking with the police, Haley has reached out to several domestic violence shelters in Chicago, but was turned away because she needed medical care they couldn't provide. Why didn't she call me? I asked, voice breaking. She says she tried once, about 3 months ago. Your mother intercepted the call and punished her by taking away her phone for weeks. Each new revelation was a knife twisting deeper. Maya explained that the medical evidence strongly suggested systematic neglect and possibly intentional harm through inappropriate medication. There would likely be a criminal investigation, and Haley would need a safe place to recover once she was discharged. Can I see her? I asked after absorbing as much as I could. Maya led me to Haley's room in the general medical ward. My sister looked tiny in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and 4 bags. Her arms, now exposed in the hospital gown, showed the unmistakable signs of someone who had lost weight too rapidly, skin slightly loose around once fuller limbs, faint stretch marks indicating previous better nourishment. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached the bed. Cass, she whispered, her voice raspy. You're still here? Of course I am, I said, carefully taking her hand, mindful of the 4. I'm not going anywhere. A tear slipped down her cheek. Thank you for believing me, she whispered. No one else did. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead gently against hers. I believe you now, and I'm so sorry it took me this long. I promise, Haley, I won't let anyone hurt you again. Her fingers tightened weakly around mine, a ghost of the strong grip she once had. In that moment, I made a silent vow to protect my sister, regardless of the consequences my father had threatened. Some things were worth losing everything for. Morning came with harsh fluorescent lights and the steady beeping of Haley's monitors. I had dozed off in the visitor's chair, my neck stiff and my mouth dry. A nurse was checking Haley's vitals, moving efficiently but gently to avoid waking her. How is she? I whispered. Fever's down to 101, the nurse replied quietly. Doctor will be by on rounds in about an hour. I nodded my thanks, stretching to ease my cramped muscles. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 29 text messages, most from my parents, but some from unknown numbers. I ignored them all and went to find coffee. When I returned, voices from Haley's room made me pause in the hallway. absolutely devastated when we realized where she'd gone. My mother's voice, thick with what sounded like tears. We've been so worried. I froze, coffee forgotten in my hand. They were here. I pushed the door open to find my parents standing at Haley's bedside. My mother was dressed impeccably as always, not a hair out of place despite the supposedly emergency trip from Chicago. My father stood beside her in his customary business attire, hand resting possessively on the bed rail near Haley's arm. Haley herself was awake but silent, her body visibly tense, eyes wide with what I now recognized as fear. "Cassandra," my mother turned to me, tears welling in her perfectly made-up eyes. "Thank God you're here. We've been so worried about both of you." The performance was flawless, concerned parents rushing to their daughter's bedside. But something had changed in me overnight. I could see the coldness behind my mother's tears, the calculation in my father's seemingly worried expression. "What are you doing here?" I asked, setting my coffee down and moving to Haley's other side, placing myself between her and our father. "What kind of question is that?" my father replied, affronted. "Our daughter is in the hospital 3 states away. Of course we came immediately. After telling me not to help her? After calling her a cripple?" I challenged. My mother's face shifted subtly, the concerned expression faltering for just a moment. "I was upset, Cassandra. You know how Haley can be. She's been increasingly paranoid lately, accusing us of terrible things." I pulled out my phone, opened the text messages. "Should I read these to the doctor?" "To the police officer who took my statement last night." My father stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Put that away. This is a family matter, not something for strangers to get involved in." It stopped being just a family matter when Haley showed up at my door malnourished and drugged, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "You have no idea what we've been dealing with," my mother hissed, the facade of tears evaporating. "The constant demands, the attention-seeking, the manipulation. She's been tearing our family apart for years with her so-called disability." Haley flinched at her words, but remained silent, eyes darting between us. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell?" A new voice entered the conversation as Dr. Evans stepped into the room, accompanied by a different nurse. "I'm Dr. Evans, your daughter's attending physician." My parents immediately pivoted, composing their features into masks of parental concern. "Doctor, thank you so much for taking care of our Haley," my mother said warmly. "We've been beside ourselves with worry. When will she be able to travel back home with us? We want to get her back to her regular doctors in Chicago. Dr." Evans glanced at me, then at Haley, whose heart rate monitor had begun beeping more rapidly. "Actually, I'd like to discuss Haley's treatment plan privately with you," he said to my parents. "Perhaps we could step into the consultation room?" Of course, my father agreed smoothly. "Cassandra, you'll stay with Haley?" It wasn't really a question, but I nodded anyway. As they followed Dr. Evans out, my father turned back to give me a warning look that I recognized from childhood. The one that said there would be consequences for defiance. Once they were gone, Haley grabbed my hand. "They're going to try to take me back," she whispered urgently. "Dad has power of attorney. He made me sign it last year when I was on heavy painkillers after a procedure. They're not taking you anywhere, I promised, though I wasn't sure how I could stop them legally." 20 minutes later, raised voices in the hallway drew my attention. I stepped out to see my parents confronting Dr. Evans, my father's face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous," he was saying, voice elevated but controlled, always careful about public appearances. "We're her parents and legal guardians. You have no right to restrict our access." "Mr. Mitchell, as I explained, the hospital has protocols for cases where there are concerns about patient safety," Dr. Evans replied calmly. "What concerns?" my mother interjected. "Based on the paranoid ramblings of a mentally unstable girl and her gullible sister, we're consulting our attorney." "That's your right," Dr. Evans acknowledged. "But until this is resolved, I'm afraid I must ask you to respect the temporary restriction. Hospital security has been notified." As if on cue, 2 security officers appeared at the end of the hallway. My father, ever conscious of public scenes, immediately modulated his tone. "This isn't over," he said quietly to Dr. Evans. Then, noticing me, he added, "Cassandra, a word." I shook my head. "I'm staying with Haley." My mother stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. "You ungrateful little fool. You have no idea what you're doing. When this blows up in your face, and it will, don't come crying to us." They left without another word, the security officers watching until they entered the elevator. Dr. Evans turned to me with a sympathetic expression. "Your sister's social worker has filed for an emergency protective order based on the medical evidence and your statement to police. It's temporary, but it should keep them away for now." I thanked him, relief washing over me, but it was short-lived. By afternoon, the real fallout began. My phone rang with a number I recognized, my Aunt Julia, my mother's sister. "Cassandra, what on earth is going on?" she demanded when I answered. "Your mother is absolutely distraught. She says Haley ran away and is making horrible accusations." "Aunt Julia, it's not what they're telling you," I started, but she cut me off. "They told me Haley's been having delusions, that she's been refusing her medication for her bipolar disorder. They've been at their wits' end trying to help her." I felt like I'd been slapped. Bipolar disorder? Haley doesn't have bipolar disorder. She has chronic pain from her car accident. "That's not what your mother told me," Aunt Julia said, hesitation creeping into her voice. "She said Haley's been using drugs, that she's become paranoid and delusional." The pieces clicked into place. They've been lying to the whole family, haven't they? Making everyone think Haley is mentally ill or an addict instead of physically disabled. The silence on the other end was confirmation enough. After hanging up, I checked my email and found a message from my boss marked urgent. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "Cassandra, I received a concerning call from your father this morning. He says you're having some sort of breakdown and have taken your mentally ill sister from her caretakers. He mentioned you might need extended leave or even residential treatment. I'm worried about you. Please call me ASAP." I stared at the screen in disbelief. They were already making good on their threats, attempting to destroy my professional credibility. A quick check of social media showed several mutual family friends had posted vague prayers for the Mitchell family during this difficult time, messages, the kind that generated concern without specific details. The systematic dismantling of my life had begun, just as my father promised. But when I returned to Haley's room and saw her sleeping peacefully, perhaps truly safe for the first time in years, I knew I couldn't back down, regardless of what it cost me. The following day, Haley was strong enough to have a longer conversation with me and Maya, the social worker. The hospital room felt like neutral ground, a safe space where Haley could finally speak her truth without fear of retribution. "It started getting really bad about 2 years ago," Haley explained, her voice stronger though still raspy. "After I was denied disability benefits for the second time." "Your parents didn't support your application?" Maya asked, though we all knew the answer. Haley gave a bitter laugh. "Support it? They sabotaged it. Dad told the evaluator I had a history of exaggeration, and Mom, using her nursing background, suggested my symptoms were psychosomatic." I felt sick imagining my parents actively working against Haley receiving help she desperately needed. After that, they said since I couldn't support myself and refused to get better, I had to follow their rules completely. They controlled everything: my food, my medication, who I could talk to. Maya nodded, taking notes. "Were you allowed to see doctors independently?" "Never. Mom or Dad was always in the room. If I tried to speak to a doctor alone, they'd tell the doctor I was paranoid and needed supervision. When I started getting worse from the wrong medications, they told everyone I was becoming mentally unstable." "How did you figure out they were giving you the wrong medications?" I asked. Haley's eyes met mine. "I got suspicious when my symptoms kept getting worse instead of better. One night about 6 months ago, I pretended to swallow my pills, but kept them under my tongue. Later I looked them up online. One was an antipsychotic, one was a strong sedative, and one was supposedly for nerve pain, but at a dose way higher than recommended." She reached for the small backpack I'd brought from my apartment, which now sat on her bedside table. "I need to show you something." From a hidden pocket in the lining, She pulled out a small notebook with a worn cover. I started documenting everything. At first, just for myself, to make sure I wasn't actually losing my mind like they said. Then later, as evidence if I ever managed to escape. She handed me the journal. Inside were dated entries in Haley's familiar handwriting, documenting daily medications, symptoms, conversations, and incidents. There were careful notes about which pills were which, descriptions of side effects, and times when she believed medication had been added to her food. Most disturbing were the detailed accounts of emotional and psychological abuse. April 17th, Mom told Dr. Phillips I've been making up new symptoms. When I tried to describe the numbness in my legs, she interrupted to say I'd been watching medical shows and adopting symptoms I saw. Dr. P prescribed anxiety medication instead of running the tests I asked for. May 23rd, Dad took my phone away after catching me texting my old roommate Katie. Said I was spreading lies about my treatment. No outside contact allowed for 2 weeks as punishment. June 8th, tried to eat less of the dinner I suspected was medicated. Mom forced me to finish everything, stood over me until I swallowed every bite. Felt dizzy and confused within 30 minutes. Slept for 14 hours. Page after page documented a systematic campaign to isolate Haley, discredit her, and control her through medication and psychological manipulation. There's more, Haley said quietly, taking the journal back and removing several folded papers from the back cover. She handed them to Maya. Photos I managed to take of the pills they were giving me, alongside printouts of what they actually look like from medical websites. And screenshots of text messages between Mom and Dad that I found when Mom left her phone unlocked. Maya unfolded the papers, and I leaned over to see. The evidence was damning. The text messages between our parents were particularly chilling. Increased H's sedative dosage. Should keep her compliant for the disability home visit tomorrow. Mom, make sure she doesn't talk to the evaluator alone. Remember what happened last time. Dad, don't worry. She'll be too groggy to cause problems. If necessary, I'll tell them her mental state requires my presence as a medical professional. Mom, and most disturbing, we need to discuss long-term solutions. She's becoming too aware, hiding pills. Residential facility might be our best option. Found one in Wisconsin that takes difficult cases. Insurance would cover if we get the right diagnosis. Dad, the specialist I talked to suggested we could make a case for involuntary commitment if we document enough delusional episodes. Keep track of everything you can use. Mom, I had to step away, ball rising in my throat. These were my parents, the same people who had attended my school plays, who had taught me to ride a bike, who had seemed strict but loving throughout my childhood. How could I have been so blind to who they really were? Cassandra, Haley called softly. I don't blame you for not knowing. They were careful to keep the worst of it hidden from everyone. I returned to her bedside, tears streaming down my face. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. I abandoned you. They fooled everyone, Haley insisted. My doctors, our family, even me sometimes. I started to believe I really was crazy, that the pain was in my head. They're expert manipulators. Maya reviewed the evidence carefully. This appears to be a clear case of medical abuse and potential financial exploitation. Haley, did your parents have access to your finances? Haley nodded. They controlled everything. Dad set up a joint account when I moved back home after the accident. My disability checks went straight there. Disability checks? I asked, confused. I thought you were denied benefits. I was initially, Haley explained. But I reapplied with help from a patient advocate I met at physical therapy. I was approved about a year ago. Dad said he was managing the money for me, saving it for when I really needed it. I never saw any of it. Maya made a note. We'll need to look into potential financial abuse as well. This could strengthen the case for a more permanent protective order. The weight of the decision before me was immense. Supporting an investigation against my own parents could mean permanent estrangement, professional consequences, and potential financial hardship. They had already begun their campaign to discredit me, and my father had the connections to make his threats reality. But looking at Haley, my little sister who had endured years of abuse while I looked the other way, I knew there was only one choice I could make. What do you need from me? I asked Maya. Your formal statement supporting the investigation would be most helpful, she replied. Also, Haley will need a safe place to recover once she's discharged. She can't return to your parents' home. She'll stay with me, I said without hesitation. I'll make whatever arrangements are necessary. Later that afternoon, Officer Ramirez returned to take my official statement. I provided copies of the text messages, described my parents' behavior at the hospital, and confirmed my willingness to testify if needed. As I signed the statement, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for the family I thought I had, relief for finally standing on the right side. The hospital legal department informed us that my parents had contacted their attorney, who was arguing that Haley was mentally incompetent and that my father should retain medical decision-making authority as her power of attorney. We filed an emergency petition to have the power of attorney temporarily suspended based on the evidence of potential abuse, the hospital's patient advocate explained. The judge granted a temporary restraining order preventing your parents from making medical decisions or having contact with Haley until the hearing next week. It was a small victory, but an important one. That night, as Haley slept, I sat by her window watching the Boston skyline glitter in the darkness. My phone contained dozens of missed calls and messages from family members and friends, many of them clearly influenced by whatever story my parents were spreading. I scrolled through them, noting who was asking questions and who had already taken sides. My cousin Michael had sent a simple text, "I don't know what's happening, but I'm here if you need to talk." My childhood friend Stephanie was less open-minded. "How could you accuse your parents of such terrible things? They've always been so good to you girls." The division was beginning, just as I'd feared. But with each piece of evidence, each medical confirmation of Haley's mistreatment, my resolve strengthened. Some relationships were worth sacrificing to protect what truly mattered. As I watched my sister's chest rise and fall in peaceful sleep, perhaps the first truly safe sleep she'd had in years, I knew I had made the right choice. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments, legal consultations, and preparations for Haley's discharge. I took emergency family leave from work, grateful that my immediate supervisor believed me despite my parents' attempts to undermine my credibility. "Take the time you need," Roger had told me after I explained the situation. "Your sister comes first. The team can handle the Henderson project." Haley was released to my care on a crisp Tuesday morning. The drive to my apartment was quiet, Haley gazing out the window at the Boston streets, as if seeing freedom for the first time. "It's weird," she said finally, "to go somewhere without having to ask permission or worry about punishment." My heart broke a little more at her words. We had a long road ahead of us. The first specialist appointment came 2 days later. Dr. Krishnan, a rheumatologist specializing in chronic pain conditions, spent nearly 2 hours with Haley, reviewing her medical history and conducting a thorough examination. "Your original diagnosis was correct," she confirmed, her kind eyes meeting Haley's. "You have chronic pain syndrome resulting from your accident, complicated by some nerve damage that wasn't properly addressed at the time. The good news is, there are treatments that can help manage your symptoms effectively." Haley started to cry, years of being told her pain wasn't real finally countered by professional validation. "The bad news, Dr. Krishnan continued gently, is that some of the inappropriate medications you were given may have worsened certain aspects of your condition. And the malnutrition certainly didn't help. But," she added with determination, "we can work with that. It's not too late to improve your quality of life significantly." For the first time in years, Haley had a proper treatment plan created by doctors who believed her. Physical therapy twice weekly. Appropriate pain management with non-addictive medications. Nutritional counseling to address the malnutrition. Trauma therapy to process the psychological abuse. While Haley focused on her health, I handled the practical and legal aspects of our new reality. My one-bedroom apartment wasn't ideal for 2 people, especially with Haley's mobility issues. I rearranged furniture, installed grab bars in the bathroom, and researched accessibility options we could implement without violating my lease agreement. The financial strain was considerable. My savings were quickly depleted by medical copays, legal consultations, and additional household expenses. The irony wasn't lost on me that somewhere in Chicago, my father was likely controlling a bank account with Haley's disability payments, money that should have been supporting her care all along. The legal process moved forward in both Massachusetts and Illinois. A court date was set to determine whether criminal charges would be filed against our parents. The temporary restraining order was extended, and our parents' attempts to have Haley declared incompetent were rejected based on evaluations from her new medical team. Throughout it all, the family fracture widened. Some relatives, like Aunt Julia, initially sided with our parents but became uncertain as more evidence emerged. Others, particularly on my father's side, closed ranks around them without question. Childhood friends took sides, social media became a battlefield, and my parents' campaign to discredit us grew increasingly desperate. "They're saying I kidnapped you," I told Haley one evening as we ate takeout on my small balcony. Dad's friend at the Chicago Tribune ran a story about mental health advocacy that basically painted them as martyrs dealing with a troubled daughter. Haley pushed her food around her plate. "Are you sorry?" "For helping me, I mean. Your life was perfect before I showed up." I set down my fork and took her hand. "My life wasn't perfect, Haley. It was built on lies and complicity. I'm not sorry for a second, not 1 second, that you came to me." A week later, we received an unexpected ally. Dr. Lawrence, a neurologist who had treated Haley briefly after her accident, contacted Haley's new medical team. "I always had concerns about your parents' involvement in your care," he admitted during a conference call. "They would interrupt you during appointments, answer questions directed to you, and seemed overly insistent on certain medications while rejecting others. I made notes in your file, but when I suggested you come alone to your next appointment, they never brought you back." His testimony strengthened the case against our parents substantially. The hardest moments came at night, when the apartment was quiet and the weight of everything settled upon us. Haley still had nightmares, often waking in panic, unsure of where she was. I would sit with her, reminding her she was safe, that no one could force pills down her throat or lock her in her room anymore. And I had my own demons to face, guilt that threatened to consume me in unguarded moments. How had I not seen what was happening? How had I accepted our parents' explanations so easily? How many times had Haley tried to reach out to me in coded ways that I had missed? "We need to talk about the hearing next week," I said to Haley one morning as she did her physical therapy exercises in the living room. "They'll be there, and you'll have to see them for the first time since the hospital. Are you ready for that?" Haley's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her resistance band. "I don't know," she admitted. "The thought of being in the same room with them makes me feel like I can't breathe. What if I freeze? What if I can't tell my story?" I knelt beside her exercise mat. "You won't be alone. I'll be there, Maya will be there, our attorney will be there. And Haley," I squeezed her shoulder gently, "you're the strongest person I know. You survived years of what they did to you. You can survive telling your truth for a few hours." Her eyes met mine, fear gradually giving way to determination. "Promise you won't leave me alone with them?" "Not even for a minute." "I promise," I said. "You're not facing them alone this time. Or ever again," I silently added. 6 months after that terrifying night when Haley collapsed at my door, we sat together on the newly installed window seat in our apartment. Yes, our apartment now, as we decided to make the living arrangement permanent. Boston spring brought a gentle breeze through the open window, carrying the scent of blooming trees from the park across the street. Haley looked different now, still thin, but healthfully so, her face filled out with proper nutrition. Her hair had regained its auburn shine, and though she still used a cane most days, her physical therapist was pleased with her progress. The proper treatment plan had made a world of difference. "I got accepted," she said, passing me her tablet, which displayed an email from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. "Online program in graphic design. I can study at my own pace, working around my good and bad days." "Haley, that's amazing." I hugged her carefully, mindful of her still tender points. "We should celebrate tonight." My own career had recovered from the initial damage our parents attempted to inflict. After a brief leave of absence, I returned to the design agency with my supervisor's full support. I'd even expanded my professional focus to include accessibility design and had recently completed a project for a disability advocacy organization. The legal matters had been resolved with less drama than we'd feared. Our parents received 3 years of probation and mandatory counseling rather than jail time, a result Haley and I had actually advocated for. As she wisely pointed out, seeing them punished wasn't as important as ensuring they couldn't hurt her anymore. A permanent restraining order prevented them from contacting either of us. The financial investigation resulted in the recovery of most of Haley's disability payments, which had indeed been diverted to an account under our father's control. The court appointed an independent trustee to manage the back pay until Haley felt ready to take control of her finances. We'd made the difficult decision to limit contact with extended family rather than force relatives to choose sides. Some, like Aunt Julia, had come around after seeing the evidence and now checked in regularly. Others remained firmly in our parents' camp, convinced that Haley was mentally unstable and I had been manipulated. We had learned to let go of the need for universal understanding or validation. Therapy had been essential for both of us, individual sessions for our specific traumas and occasional joint sessions to rebuild our sisterly relationship. We were learning to communicate honestly, to recognize the manipulation tactics we'd both internalized from our upbringing, and to establish healthy boundaries with each other and the world. Do you ever miss them? Haley asked suddenly, her eyes on the distance outside our window. Mom and Dad, I mean. I considered the question carefully. I miss who I thought they were, I answered honestly. I miss the idea of having parents who truly loved us. But the real them? No, I don't miss the real them at all. Haley nodded. Sometimes I have these dreams where Mom is kind, where she believes me about the pain and helps instead of hurts. I wake up crying, missing this mother who never actually existed. I took her hand. That's the hardest part, isn't it? Grieving people who are still alive but were never who we needed them to be. The therapist says that's normal, Haley replied. Grief for the family we deserved but never had. We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching pedestrians pass by on the street below, each wrapped in their own life stories, their own invisible battles. You know what still amazes me? Haley said finally. How easily manipulation can hide abuse in supposedly respectable families. Everyone thought our parents were these great people, Dad the successful attorney, Mom the former nurse who gave up her career for her children. Their house was always perfect when people visited. They donated to charities, went to church, did everything right on the surface. People believe what's comfortable to believe, I said. It's easier to think a young woman is exaggerating her pain than to accept that her parents are systematically drugging her. It's easier to dismiss invisible disabilities than to accommodate them. Being believed is the first step to healing, Haley murmured, echoing a phrase from her support group. When you believed me that night, you saved my life. Literally and figuratively. The weight of that truth settled between us, how close we had come to a very different outcome. If I had listened to our mother's text, if I had sent Haley away or returned her to our parents' care, she might not have survived. The medical reports had made that devastatingly clear. I'm thinking about starting a blog, Haley said, changing the subject. About chronic illness, invisible disabilities, and medical gaslighting. So many people in my support group have similar stories, not as extreme as mine, but the same patterns of not being believed, being told it's all in their head. I think that's a fantastic idea, I encouraged her. Your voice matters, and your experience could help others recognize warning signs earlier than we did. As evening fell, casting long shadows across our living room, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed in half a year. The family we were born into had shattered beyond repair, but in its place, we were building something stronger, a chosen family based on truth, respect, and genuine love rather than control and appearances. Family, I had learned, wasn't defined by blood, but by who stood beside you when standing was hardest. It was defined by those who believed your truth even when doubting would be easier. It was about support without strings, love without conditions. For those watching who might be in situations similar to what Haley endured, or who suspect someone they know might be suffering in silence, trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it often is. Invisible pain is still real pain. Invisible abuse is still real abuse. And help is available, even when it seems like the whole world is aligned against you. If this story resonated with you, please share it to help others recognize the signs of medical abuse and gaslighting. Drop a comment if you or someone you know has experienced dismissal of chronic pain or invisible disabilities. Your story matters and deserves to be heard. Subscribe to join our community of survivors and allies working to bring these hidden struggles into the light. And remember, the most important thing you can say to someone who's suffering is simply, "I believe you." Thank you for listening to our story. May you find the strength to seek or offer help when it's needed most, and the wisdom to know that family is defined by love, not obligation.